Alright, so on note 6.3, we're going to be solving rational equations. So remember we talked about rational before. That means you have a fraction. So we're going to have fractions in our equation. So we're solving, which means we're finding x. Okay, so this is very similar to what we were doing on complex fractions. Complex fraction, we had a fraction on top and bottom. So our goal was to get rid of those fractions on top and bottom so we could simplify the one fraction at the end. So we use the LCD to get rid of those fractions. So you're going to be doing the same thing on rational equations. Your goal is to get rid of the fractions, then you can solve for x. Okay, so that's what we're doing first, is finding the LCD. So we have an x in the first denominator, so bring it down. Second denominator, we have an x. We already have an x, so the LCD would be x. So you're taking that x and you're multiplying it by everything in this equation. So you're going to have x times 5 over x plus x times 2 equals x times 6 over x. Okay, so we are looking at it. Notice the x's cancel here. We just have a 5. Bring down your plus sign. X times 2, we get 2x. Notice on the other side of the equation, the x's cancel, you just have a 6. So we got rid of the fractions, and now we're solving a linear equation. So we're going to subtract 5. 2x equals 1, so therefore x would be a half. Okay? Alright, so we found x. Remember, we've talked about extraneous solutions before. Anytime you're solving a rational equation, the one thing that you need to check for is you need to make sure that it doesn't cause your denominator to be 0, because that would make it undefined. So that's what you're going to be checking for whenever you're solving a rational equation. So plug that x back in or that number back into x in your original equation. If it causes your denominator to be 0, you know that's not a correct solution, because it would make it undefined. So notice if we plug a 1/2 in for x, we don't get a 0 in the denominator, so that's a good solution to have. So x equals a half. And you could always just plug it back in and check it also if you wanted to check yourself. Okay, looking at 2, we're finding the LCD. You need to factor before you find the LCD. So notice this first denominator, they have an x in common. So you're left with x plus 1. So I'm bringing those both down. Notice the second denominator is x plus 1, but we already have an x plus 1. And then the last denominator is an x. We already have an x. So there's my LCD. I'm going to multiply it by every single term in our equation. Notice that's negative 1 over x. Okay, so now we're going to look and see what cancels. Notice x and x plus 1 cancels. We're left with a 3. Notice x plus 1 cancels on this one, so we need to multiply those and bring down that plus sign, so that's plus 3x. Bring your equal sign down. Notice the x's cancel. We have a negative 1 that we will have to distribute to that x plus 1. So that's going to be a negative x minus 1. So we got rid of the fractions by multiplying everything by the LCD. Now we have a linear equation, so we're going to solve for x. So we're going to add x to both sides. And then we'll subtract 3. So you get 4x equals negative 4. So x would equal a negative 1. So anytime you're solving a rational equation, you have fractions. So once you find your solution, make sure to plug it back in and make sure it doesn't cause your denominator to be 0. So if we plug in a negative 1 for x in our original, notice right here, -1 plus 1 is going to cause that fraction to be undefined, okay? So if you have one solution, you plug it back in and it causes your denominator to be 0, there is not a real solution for this equation. So just write no solution there. So make sure when you're solving your rational equations, you're plugging it back in and checking for a 0 in the denominator. We can't have that. That's undefined. Okay, so looking at 3. So LCD first, so that way we can get rid of the fractions. Notice your first denominator is x minus 2, and I can't factor it, so bring it down. Notice the second denominator is also x minus 2. I already have that. So then we need to factor this third one. So the sum would be 3, product would be -10. So that would be a +5 and a -2. Notice we already have an x minus 2. We need to bring down the x plus 5. So there's my LCD. I'm multiplying everything in my equation by the LCD. Make sure that you write the factored form, so x plus 5 and x minus 2. Okay, so we're going through to get rid of those fractions. So notice x minus 2 cancels. I need to distribute the 2, so that's 2x plus 10. Bring down your equal sign. X minus 2's cancel. I need to distribute the x, so that's x squared plus 5x. Bring your plus sign down. Both of them cancel here, so we're left with 6. Okay, so on number 1 and number 2, once we got rid of the fractions, we were left with a linear equation. Notice we have a quadratic equation. So when you're solving a quadratic equation, we're going to set it equal to 0. So I'm going to subtract 2x and subtract 10. So all of that is 0. We have x squared plus 3x minus 4. So there's lots of methods to solving a quadratic equation. Quadratic formula, completing the square, factoring, plugging it into the calculator and finding the roots. We're going to factor. So the sum would be 3, product would be -4. So that would be +4 and -1. Now, I'm solving, so once you have factored, you're setting each factor equal to 0. So x would equal -4 and +1. Okay, so remember, we're solving a rational equation with fractions. We can't have a 0 in the denominator, so make sure you're checking for that. So go back up and plug in. So -4 minus 2, we're going to get -6, so that works. That's not a 0. -4 plus 5, we get 1, and then -6, so that works. Plugging in a 1, notice that also doesn't cause it to be 0, so actually both of them would be a good solution. X equals a -4, +1. So you're just plugging it back into the denominators on your equation on the original and checking to make sure that 0 is not in your denominator, because that's undefined. Okay, number 4. You find the LCD first. So first denominator is x minus 3. We can't factor, so I'm bringing it down. Second denominator is x plus 3. I do not already have an x plus 3, so I need to bring it down. The third denominator is difference of squares. You're going to factor that to x plus 3, x minus 3, and we already have both of those in the LCD. So that would be our LCD there. So I'm I'm multiplying every term on our equation by the LCD, so that way I can get rid of the fractions. Make sure you write the factored form, x plus 3 and x minus 3. Okay, so notice x minus 3 cancels. We need to distribute the 2, so that's 2x plus 6. X plus 3 cancels. We need to bring down that minus sign, and I'm going to go ahead and open up parentheses because I'm going to have more than one term. 4x minus 12. So you need parentheses there because there's going to be more than one term that you'll have to distribute. The right side of the equation, both of them cancel, so you're just left with 8. Okay, so from here, make sure you distribute that subtraction. So 2x plus 6 minus 4x plus 12 equals 8. So notice we have a linear equation, so we need to combine like terms, and then we'll get x by itself. So combining your like terms, you have a negative 2x plus 18 equals 8. So subtract 18. We have negative 2x equals negative 10. So x would equal positive 5. Okay, so look back at your original equation there. Notice if we were to plug a 5 in, that it would not cause your denominator to be 0. So that's a good solution. X equals 5. So sometimes you'll have one solution, two solutions, and then sometimes you won't have a solution because it's undefined because it causes your denominator to be 0. Okay, last one. You need to find the LCD. First denominator is x plus 2. Looking at your second denominator, it's x minus 2. Those are not the same, so I need to bring it down. So there's my LCD. Make sure that you're multiplying it by everything. Okay, so let's see what cancels. So x plus 2 cancels. We distribute the x to get x squared minus 2x. Bring down your minus sign. X minus 2's cancel. We need parentheses because we're going to end up with two terms here. 4x plus 8. Then you'll have to distribute that subtraction sign. Notice here, nothing cancels. So I'm going to go ahead and multiply these two using FOIL. X squared. Notice the 2 and negative 2 is going to add to 0, so that middle term will cancel. And then we'll get negative 4 when we multiply them. So I multiply those two binomials. Now I'll have to distribute the 2. So that's going to give me 2x squared minus 8. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and distribute this subtraction. Alright, so notice we have a quadratic equation. So anytime we have a quadratic equation, we need to set it equal to 0. So before I do that, though, I'm going to combine my like terms on the left side. Okay, if we're going to factor, we want the x squared term to be positive. So notice I would need to move all of my left side to the right side in order for my x squared to be positive. So I'm going to subtract x squared, add 6x, and add 8. So now I have a 0. 2x squared minus x squared is 1x squared. I can combine those two, which they cancel. And I have plus 6x. Okay, so once I've set it equal to 0, I'm going to use factoring to solve it. Notice they have an x in common. And you're left with x plus 6. That's all I can do with the factoring. So I'm going to set each one, this one, equal to 0, and also this one equal to 0. So x would equal 0 or negative 6. So again, we're solving a rational equation with fractions. You need to make sure that those numbers do not cause your denominator to be 0. So if you plug in a 0, 0 plus 2, 0 minus 2, that doesn't cause it to be 0. So x can equal 0. Now, notice the top would be 0, but we can have a 0 on top of a fraction. We just can't have it on the bottom. Negative 6 is the other one. Negative 6 plus 2, negative 4. Negative 6 minus 2, negative 8. So that does not cause your denominator to be 0 either. So both of those would be good solutions. If you wanted to check it completely, you could plug in both of those and then work it out. Okay, so x equals 0 and negative 6 on that one. So this is solving a rational equation with fractions. You're finding the LCD so you can multiply everything by that to get rid of those fractions. That way you're able to solve your linear equation or quadratic equation from there.